So I'm back at the easel today for the third and final pass of this painting, as well as the detail work. You might ask what that entails or what I'm really looking at. Well, I'm gonna kind of break it down for you. Again, I'm talking about a still life here, of course, but this can apply to a lot of subjects because when you're really wrapping up a painting, there are some key things that you wanna look at. So first off, I'm actually going to be going in and redrawing some of these elements. Going in, fine tuning, really deciding what I want my focal point to be, and if it is still the flowers here in the front or the leaves in the front, then how I want that to be represented. So you're gonna see me and I'll talk you through it. I'm actually gonna go fairly slowly through this video, not do much time lapse in this one, and I'll talk you through some of the steps that I'm doing as I go. Also, it's a little overcast and kind of backlit today, so I definitely want you to hear what I'm doing step by step. I'm trying to keep as much light on it as possible, but it might be easier if I kind of paint and talk, so I will do my best to do that as well. So there's going to be some redrawing aspects or just locking in positioning. The other thing, I need to fine tune color still and think about texture. So I've opened up my palette here and I've also added some more medium. So I'm not just gonna do linseed oil anymore. I'm gonna add some stand oil and some cold wax because they offer different looks and textures. Let me just pull this down slightly so you can see the palette. So again, there's the setup, the painting, the palette, and I'm gonna try to have this visible throughout the video. What do I have now? So I have titanium white, I had that cadmium yellow hue, and now I've added a little bit of lemon yellow. Why? Because it's cooler than cadmium yellow and will offer some different shifts as far as space and distance here. So anything that's warm kind of comes forward, anything that's cool recedes. This is raw umber. This is Venetian red. So I have two kinds of earth reds, but one's a little neutral, cool, which is the raw umber, and the other one is very warm. But they're both earth tones. Nothing's like a cadmium red. I'm not really using any of that right now. If anything, and I'm gonna pull that out, I'm probably gonna pull out a little bit of alizarin because there's still a lot of cool reds in my still life. Or where cool reds exist. Venetian red will take care of most of the pop reds because Venetian red has a lot of pigment to it. The reds that are saturated. Then this is Viridian here, and this is Phthalo green. So they're both kind of cool greens. They're dark and rich, but this one, the Phthalo green, being much cooler than the other. And the reason I'm considering that is because the leaves in the back, I can push them kind of cool to help them recede, okay? And then a little bit of black in case I need it. So again, this is my full palette. I'm gonna add a little bit of alizarin crimson here before I get started, and that's about it. Linseed oil, stand oil, and some cold wax medium, okay? So again, I'm gonna keep this on the slower side today, not as much time lapse unless I feel like I just wanna push through a section because I wanna talk you through what it is I'm doing exactly so you can just really watch it step by step. That being said, it's gonna be a little bit of a longer video because of the lack of the time lapse. But feel free to stop and start it as you're working. You don't have to just sit and watch, you can work and listen to what I'm doing as well. Okay, be back in a moment. Okay, so I'm gonna start to talk you through it's kind of a live stream situation. So I'm going to paint and give you the step-by-step what it is I'm doing exactly as I'm going. So like I said, the first thing is I wanna redraw into this a little bit. So I'm gonna dip my brush into the linseed oil. Okay, so this is the medium that I've been using. Grab some white paint. When I redraw, I usually redraw with white. That's kind of my go-to. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I get kind of a better, I've been painting this for a while. Sometimes you kind of lose touch with what it is that you're doing. Sometimes things get, I paint pretty abstractly to begin with, so I lose a sense of where the objects are. So this is a way to work on some details and fine tune what it is I'm really going for. Also, the lights changed a little bit as time has gone on because I've worked on this at different times of day. So I need to really hone in again on where things are and how I want to paint them. So I'm going to start with what my focal point is, which is this, which is the plant in the front. And I'm actually going to go in and start to draw things a little more specifically. Okay, like I said, kind of fine tuning. Again, loose, almost like I'm using charcoal, but really drawing the plant. And again, when I go in, I will speed it up a little bit when I go into the detail work of the plant, because that might be kind of time consuming and there's only so much to explain as I'm getting into the detail work. But what I'm doing right now, again with the white paint, is just really going through and redrawing and putting in some of the elements that I haven't really paid attention to yet. Again, so all of the different leaf patterns. Still trying to be specific, but trying to give myself room to grow here, okay? Or room to adjust, not being too locked in. Again, I'm kind of sitting maybe in a little bit of a different position. Some things have changed, so I will want to get in there and kind of scrape out and redraw that as well. Okay, so some of the plant, drawing that here, a little bit, something here. Yeah, again, this goes into the mug there. Now, just being said, you can also kind of improvise. I mean, I sometimes, if I see a leaf a certain way and I don't really like where it is, I, go ahead and take some liberties and change that. So it doesn't always have to be exactly what's there. Something you sometimes might see something in the composition that you want different. Okay. Again, I do need to make sure to adjust this mug, make sure that I've got the ellipse correct. So I'm going to sight measure. When you see me do this with my fingers, I'm sight measuring. I'm just making sure that the distance, the gap here really feels like I'm looking kind of inside of that mug, but down as well. And I want to make sure to represent that. Okay, so I'm going to make sure the size. So it's about 1, 2, 3, about 5 lengths of the mug. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so I need to make that a little bit smaller. So I'm going to bring up the lip here that's closest to me. Okay, that's what really gives that sense of depth and perspective. Okay. Again, the nice thing about white is it doesn't fight the colors that you're going to be using later. So it's a really nice, it's kind of like a paint eraser. Okay, it has a lot of flexibility. This is some of that plant that's going to be in the back here, okay? And then bringing through Pickles, I think, wants water. He's go ahead and drink your water, bud. My painting makes him thirsty. Okay. Checking the angle of that handle, bringing that down a little bit. Round. Again, kind of going into the drapery now. And this, all these lines here look pretty good, so I'm not going to redraw too much of this. Now, like I said, sometimes I use sandpaper and I kind of sand into the surface, especially if I want to change an area. You saw me do that last time. I'm pretty good today, so I'm probably not going to do that this time. I'm probably just going to kind of go with my drawing and really just build at this point and adjust colors and clean up. Okay. Flower in here. Draw this here. You might be wondering, okay, how am I going to paint this really? How am I going to paint that flower? Well, you're really going to want to look at the general shapes. Kind of keep it abstract. This is why, again, I do the outline in white, because I don't want it to fight what I'm going to do later with the color mixing, really bringing this up, okay? Now, I did also bring out that cold wax medium, and the reason that I did that is because the texture of the cold wax is kind of matte and flat, and I can make this pot really shiny with the stand oil. and then it really kind of contrasts the texture. I'll hold that up to the camera close when I'm finished there, and you'll really see how that is how the difference in texture really stands out. And go back here. Again, I can tell I've shifted in my seating a little bit, or my seat. So there are some differences as far as the composition is concerned, but that's okay. It can all be sorted out. Now, back into this teapot, I do now want to go ahead and draw some of the details and really fine tune what that looks like. Okay, let's go back into this plant. And there's just a lot of texture in that fern. And so I'm just gonna kind of paint it nice, loose, little textured object. Okay, but the main thing is the contrast between the teapot and the green plant in front. And I'm really, as the slowed down version of this painting, I'm really gonna focus on that while I'm talking to you. And then, like I said, not really speed this up until I'm getting into the detail work, which takes some time, right? So probably not a lot to tell you then as I'm moving through the details, but I want to tell you how I'm getting there, okay? So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to redraw this pot, and I am also just focusing on the general shapes. This is how you make something look shiny, is that you really look at the hard edge shapes inside. I don't really focus that much on the outside at this point. I'm looking very abstractly into the object itself, okay? So this is the curve of the edge of the teapot, again, redrawing with white, and then moving up to the top here. That's kind of a good, kind of hold on to that. And really, I'm trying to kind of draw through or paint through. You might be asking yourself, well, okay, we're really doing a lot of drawing right now. Well, that's what I do. I kind of loosely draw out my subject in the beginning, and then I really wait till this stage to really lock it in. And that's partially because that gives me flexibility in those first and second passes to kind of move things around, push the paint together, not worry about edges, and really make this juicy surface, okay? So that's why I just really wait till this point and double check my angles. You know, things have shifted around a little bit, and I've shifted around. And so this just makes it so I don't have to really, I can kind of still have an open painting, and I can really still move it around now without destroying much of what I've done. Okay, there we go. Let me line up where that is, kind of out here. And again here, I look at what's in front of me, but also I don't, you know, for the sake of the composition, if I want this teapot to end, the spout to end here, I let that happen. It's technically kind of right in the middle, but compositionally is not my favorite thing. So it's okay. A tiny little adjustment like that isn't going to completely destroy the composition. Larger adjustments can make things look disproportionate, but something like that, not so much. As long as I have the angle of the spout okay and real close to its exact location, it's going to look accurate. And that's the nice thing about objects too. Little discrepancies like that don't really show. When you're dealing with the figure, that's a little different, but in this particular situation, not so much. Okay, the handle kind of wraps around out, and I cut that off there, and that's okay. And then we come back in here, and then we pull it back around. It's kind of like how you draw an eye, and that little gap. And that gap's changed on me a couple times, and I think I'm just gonna stick with this. Cropping something so close to the edge like I did is a little tricky, but as long as I'm careful about these shapes and what I've left over, I don't think it's a big deal. So when I say that, like, what am I doing with the composition here? How have I made that dynamic? What's the shape here? As long as I'm paying attention to that real snipping of the handle, it's in some ways a no-no to cut it so close like I did here. But again, I'm looking at these shapes. The other thing is I did not cut off this handle, and I intentionally gave it room here because I didn't want to do that on both sides. Again, this is kind of a technical issue. Feel free to ask me questions in the comments if you're not sure as to why that would be, but when you are cropping, you got to be careful not to crop. You have to leave room around objects. You have to, cropping on one side is fine, but cropping on both sides actually in some ways can flatten your composition. You want to give these beautiful, I call them kind of tributaries or rivers around your composition so that the eye travels nicely. Okay, again, we're going to move into here. That's going here. Double check my layout on this side. This looks actually really good. So that's dialed in the way I want it. All I have to do is kind of fine tune the drape. So I don't really have to pay much attention to the drape right now. The key issues are within the teapot and then this flower right here. Okay, and then also the mug. The mug needs to be locked in as well. So I'm gonna really be focusing in this area. Talk you through it first, time lapse a little bit to pull it up. Last and leftover will be drape, flower here, some of the background, kind of touching that up. But this is where your eye goes, is really here. So I have to make sure that that's working for me. Okay, so what am I gonna do there? I'm gonna put my, this is my drawing brush. I'm gonna put that to the side. As you see, I just pick up brushes for what I need. I'm working with small brushes this time. And sometimes I just kind of pick up, feel, I think I'm going to do kind of a round one for the detail on the, I'm going to do a couple, one for the dark, sorry, the detail on the flower, one for the dark. I've got cold wax on some of my stuff. Not fun. A little messy. One for the detail and one for the lights. I'm going to do both rounds. They're kind of bristled. They're little heavy brushes, heavy bristle brushes that I'm using right now. So there we go. And that, the reason I'm doing that, the heavy bristle brushes here, is that will pick up the cold wax. Okay. Cold wax. Again, cold wax medium is exactly, it's wax. And what it does is it adds this kind of, it's almost like a whipped texture to the paint. It's really pretty. And then it dries waxy and matte. And these flowers, I know it's hard to see, but these fake flowers that I put in the still life, they have kind of a waxy texture. So this is advantageous. Now, this gray green that I've used here is actually pretty nice. I just need to kind of juice it up a little bit, or I can go through and start doing the highlights of the green, and then I could glaze that later. So that might be what I'm gonna do. Just because the gray green is really nice. I do have to moderately kind of make sure that I get that white out a little bit, but I can do that with the highlights. So I'm gonna start with these highlights here that you can see. So I'm really starting to clean up this flower. I'm gonna grab some cadmium yellow. I'll be mixing up here so you can see it, cadmium yellow. Okay, that's what's there, and a little bit of viridian, okay? But it's really more cadmium yellow than anything else. Kind of this yellow green, very much on the yellow side is what we're dealing with here. Okay, there's some, I think there's some tree trimming today, so apologies. If it gets too loud, I will switch to time lapse so you don't have to listen to the background. And I've got guard dog dealing with it. Okay, so that, if you can see it, okay, that is a yellow green. I'm gonna use for the highlights there. Pull this out a little bit more. Okay, good job, Pickles. Yeah, that's a good boy. And then I'm going to take the viridian to this side. Okay, as you can see, that olive green is there, but I don't really want to change it too much. It's looking good. Add some more yellow to that. I just need it to be able to kind of dip into if necessary. And I'm actually adding my Venetian red to that because that's what's giving it that earthy look, okay? So I hope you can see that as well in the camera. See how I'm mixing? Gives it this red-green earthy look. Okay, add just a tiny bit more of the viridian back. So we have more of a green rather than a red green. So we have some options here, okay? So in the shadows. So again, complements, red cancels green. Pull this palette. I've got two palettes, one to the side that I can scrape. Now, I scrape my, if you saw me way back here, I scrape my palette knife on edges. This is why the edges of everything, this is duct taped to a table, so I don't have that advantage here. But that's what I do. Okay, now what happens when I put the cold wax in? Let's look at that. Cold wax does two things. It kind of extends the paint, which is nice. Okay, pull this up here. Extends the paint out and gives it, again, I can see right here, I'm gonna pull this up. It's got like a buttery texture to it and it's matte already. It's very nice. Okay, so I'm gonna get going. I usually use a brush for the light, one brush for the light and one brush for the dark. Okay, so right there, again, this is the highlight area with the cold wax. And I can do a couple passes on here. It's a little thin. And then one more right here. And actually that second one is a little more on the yellow side. Okay, so one side's a little bit yellowy here. In the back, it's a little more green, so I'm gonna add some white to the mixture. So this is why I'm talking you through it, is because, I'll kind of put it up here so you can see that better. I'm talking you through this because you can see how my logic goes. So as I go, I start to adjust based on what I see. So I pre-mix some stuff, but this doesn't stay the same the entire time. So I say it's good to get it started or string out the paint, but you're gonna think about, as you go, you're just gonna be dipping into your mixtures, you know, adjusting what you see as you go. It's kind of the nice thing about observational painting, is it's very mutable in that sense, okay? One thing about cold wax, once you start using it, the painting dries a little bit faster. Okay, and also I'm just gonna kind of leave that there, mask it a little bit, because then if it's not as bright as I want it to be, if it's a little too thin right now, I can go back over it later with a little bit of a yellow pop. Okay, over here, another one of the, oops, accidentally picked up some of the dark, so I gotta switch out the brush there. And again, I might, actually, let's just go for the dark now. Again, really, there is a focal point right there that is just really important. And I'm trying to get that light that's hitting these little branches or these little leaves, really get those dialed in. Okay, that area, once that focal point's in there, kind of that dark leaf and those little highlights, then that's kind of good to go at that point. And I'm leaving the white a little bit because there's kind of an edge around some of these. Okay. Again, got to go back in. The paint's kind of juicy. Go back in and still really add that greenish yellow highlight. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. And one over here. And bring that down. Okay, so there's that. So you can see these are, that's how I'm kind of working the highlight area, and I'm gonna keep working through that. Let me hold this up a little bit closer to the camera. Okay, see how that's working there? See how I'm kind of getting in bit by bit, looking at the baby adjustments. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna switch it over to a time lapse and speed it up a little bit, and really go in and fill in this in the flower area. So what you saw me work on there was that green area, so those leaves there in the front. And I do often get the question, well, what mixture was here and what did you use? It's once you get the base colors down, it's really feel. You gotta let yourself kind of flow into the piece. So a little more yellow on one side, a little more blue on another, green, gray, so on and so forth. That's really by feel. And sometimes I adjust it based on what I think the piece needs. So it's not always just about direct observation, it is sometimes also about the flow. I've also started to add contrast back into the areas behind just to redefine. So I'm always redrawing and redefining as I go. So I'm gonna skip around here for a second, and the next thing that I wanna show you, let me kind of scrape this down. Now when I get back into the leaves, which I will, I always kind of do a pass everywhere before I'm done with a piece. Just kind of scrape that color down. I'm going to go back into this silver pot here because I think that that also is a textural challenge that I want to talk about with everybody. Now, towards the end, I'm actually just going to go ahead and I'll finish up this painting, not necessarily via time lapse because I have to paint it in angles. So it will be nice for me to just kind of get in there and really work on it. And then I can talk about the finished piece when that's done. Again, you can always leave questions below the YouTube or when I post into the module there as well. And each time I do a painting, I can highlight on a different technique in different area. So you feel like you can really get a range of ways to paint. Again, when it comes to really mixing and specific mixtures, this is something that you're gonna get to know over time. What you have to set up for yourself is a starting point, okay? So there's no perfect science with this. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a rag. It's really feeling it out as you go and learning as you go. So getting into the teapot, what's the logic here? Now, my piece is really set up in this neutral red-green zone. So beautiful earth greens here, kind of some earth reds. The teapot, since it's grayish silver, can kind of absorb whatever I want it to absorb. So what I want it to, it can go a lot of different directions and it can stay kind of neutral. So what I'm thinking is I see these kinds of like blackish and purples in the backs. I think I'll probably go ahead and I also, by the way, and I'm gonna go into here as well, there's this beautiful kind of gray-green inside of the mug and I wanna really pull that up because the more that I can put some frosty greens in or cool greens, the more I can make certain areas of the painting recede color-wise. Okay, so I'm gonna start with that here. So let's do with the teapot. How are we gonna paint these clean edges? And what am I gonna mix? Well, why don't I go ahead, I have some black on my palette and I can do a little black, okay, with some of this. I'm gonna go ahead with the phthalo green, okay, kind of keeping with the greens. Oh, and the one color that I did not have out for a minute was the phthalo blue, and that's helpful because that's gonna make your cool green just a little cooler. And I am gonna throw a little phthalo blue in there as well. And I'm gonna be honest, that shadow is not the blackest black, so I'm gonna throw some white into it. Okay, you can see what I've got going on right here, okay? So that shadow, what I'm looking at right here is kind of a darker version of what's inside of my mug right now. I do need that teapot and I can kind of make a decision. Do I want to go towards more what's in the mug or do I want to shift it up a little bit? I think I'm going to go towards what's in the mug maybe make it a baby bit more neutral. So to do that, I need to add a little bit of red into that shadow. It's just gonna make it grayer. Okay, I'm gonna add some white. That opens it up and I can really see what's going on there. Okay, and you can see right down here on a palette, that's pretty gray, okay? So I'm gonna add the main mixture back in. And just go ahead and go for that. Yeah, I'm gonna actually, yeah, I'll keep it that gray green. Okay, so this one here that I ended up mixing looks really good for inside of the teapot. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. That's a good mixture for there. And clean up that teapot area. I might need to darken it slightly. Or I'm sorry, not teapot, mug. Apologies, mug. So I'm cleaning up the mug shadow is what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing there. Okay, so that mug shadow I needed to change because it was just a little too blackish. It didn't have that green in it. Now I'm gonna move over here. In this little shape that I drew, that's where I'm gonna put my darkest kind of green gray. But well, that's kind of perfect. Again, when I look at it, it's got more of a purple tint to it. But I'm not gonna pay attention to that because I want my colors to be cohesive. So this is where I'm taking some artistic liberty. The other thing I'm gonna start adding into this mixture is the stand oil. I'm gonna pull this out. Now, hold it up to the camera. Whoop. This is a very thick oil and it's like honey. And what this does is give it a bit of a gloss. So if I use this oil on the teapot, the texture of the teapot is gonna change a little bit to be shiny and glossy. And that will bring a lot of contrast in the end to the matte feeling. I don't know if you can see this yet, but it's gonna bring a lot of contrast to the matte feeling that's going on here. So it's one way that you can really bring texture to your pieces. I might actually go ahead and just put a little bit of that in the mug as well. The mug here, and that's gonna really just make these both kind of different and shiny. That's gonna add some shine. Might be asking, oh, what are you gonna do with the white edges? Well, that's okay, they'll go away eventually. I only kind of really get rid of them when it's done and necessary. They'll all be kind of gone in the end, but for right now, I'm just kind of using them to my advantage. I'm never really worried about covering up. That will happen. Okay, so really the shadows and the values in the teapot, and I'm gonna try to grab some pen. So all these different ranges of kind of light gray to dark gray, so on and so forth, everything that's going on in the teapot is gonna come out of this gray-green now. And a little bit of, if I wanna vary it slightly, a little bit of this alizarin crimson, which adds kind of a pinky hue. Now I'm gonna let that be kind of dirty. I'm gonna let it go into the gray a little bit. And again, add white. Reach. See how light that takes it? That's a little too light. So I'm gonna add alizarin crimson back in and add my gray green. The gray green is it's dark, so it's gonna darken up your color pretty quickly, okay? I can decide, I can really amplify that pink color or keep it a little bit more neutral. Again, it's feel at this point, so it's really up to me what I wanna do there. Just feel, okay? See, I have kind of these cool reds and greens. And the nice thing about that is it's really countering this warmth in the front. So let me go ahead and start putting some of these colors in. Okay, again, I'm using stand oil because it's greasier. And I'm just kind of, I got the drawing in here. Now sometimes I use the back of the brush to make sure I've got my angle correct. Kind of painted into that a little too much. Okay, I'm gonna keep also the background color handy, which is kind of a black, yeah. That background color, I'm just kind of gonna use black, and I can kind of go into that. Background, this is kind of the line of the teapot here, and again, I can come in with that dramatically. So I'm just gonna kind of paint in a little bit of that gray. greener there, a little darker, like a mosaic a little bit. Okay. And I'm feeling it out. Do I want it to be a little bit more red on this side? Sure. So I'm going to add some of the red back in, or the pinky color. Okay. I'm going to kind of use my white as an advantage up there. So a little bit of a white highlight. So I'm going to kind of lean into that. Something that's reflective, you can kind of have fun with it because it offers just a lot of range of things that you can do. It just reflects so much, so you don't have to be too specific about your colors. You can kind of put a range of colors in there. Right down here, there's this kind of rusty look to it. So I'm kind of amplifying the color on the teapot for fun, just to give it a little bit of a contrast to everything else. And then there, that actually is a little more on the red side, so I'm gonna kind of pull that up a little bit. It's dark, but it's got a reddish reflection because that's coming from the mug here. So again, it's reflecting a bit of everything. And I can keep in as much as I want and leave out as much as I want as far as... This is important though, something like that where the edge is harsh and kind of steely. You really want to add that in. This is going to have to be nice and dark when I'm all done with that. So you want the gradation there. Once I've kind of blended all of this in, and sometimes I take a dry brush and I kind of blend in, get everything to kind of smush together. Okay. At the end, when it's all done, is when I will add those really bright highlights, and that will be thick paint. As you can see, almost like the outline. So I'm just gonna give you an example right now. Thick paint, only white. I'm gonna make them real bright. If anything, I just glaze a little bit of a color over the top of it. Here, let me pull this out. So with reflection items, I'm gonna go back and forth like that, really work on the harsh edges, and then at the end, I'll put that little highlight right on top when everything is said and done. Okay. So that is that for now. That is kind of all that I need to tell you as far as what to do with the different areas and how to deal with the textures and really how you're going to balance the colors. So in the end, this is about color balance. So this palette is primarily red and green. There's not a lot of difference and distinction here as far, it's really a straightforward complement. Where the differences lie is the fact that I'm using some cool greens and reds and then warm in the front. And that's really gonna create a lot of range and distance, but the painting's still gonna feel very unified in the end, not like I'm using just a circus full of color. And that's your goal. Again, I'm gonna keep going in this direction, in this vein. I'm gonna finish this up, and then I will have a little bit of a closing with you. Let me go ahead and turn this for a second. So I'll have like a little closing hello when this is done and really talk about what the final painting looks like. And that it will be all for still life number 1, okay? So again, remember, mixing, you kind of get your base colors and then you go by feel as you're moving through the painting. Redraw with that white on top. That helps you kind of really hone in on your composition, what you want to do there. Like I said, I'm not necessarily going to time lapse the end of this because I have to paint in at angle, so I need to kind of get in there and really get things the way I need to, but I will talk to you on video and show you the finished product when it's done, okay? See you soon, happy painting, and I'm looking forward to see what you come up with all of your still lifes as well. So this is the final version of the still life, or the detail work has been completed. As you can see, the lights really changed in my studio because it's been about an hour, a little bit more than that I've been working on this. So I'm just gonna walk you through. You can see the palette's just messy. Lots of paint going all over the place. Again, when it comes to mixtures, you really just kind of feel your way out as you go. So you set up your basic colors and then you just as you're looking at the still life, you really need to kind of adjust as you go. So for example, if this is raw umber and the Venetian red, I might make it a little bit darker, adding a little bit black of some black as I go, or over here, putting more Venetian red into the mixture because that's what I see. It's warmer there. Okay, so it's not mathematical. There's no perfect formula, but as you move along, you kind of feel it out and adjust as you go. And I take some liberties. So, in certain areas, I add some details, let those details ride. In other areas, I don't. As you can see down here for the white flowers, I kept them very basic. I didn't want to distract from the green. The green is very sticky. It has a lot of cold wax in it. It's bright. I kind of took some liberties there. There's probably a little more yellow pop than there actually was in the actual still life, but it works. The key is that reflection. So the difference between the texture and the feeling of the green in the front versus the pot here in the back, and that shininess and kind of showing the difference. I did use a lot of paint in the front, so just really loading up the brush. It almost looks like clay, or it's got this real visceral quality and can get kind of messy. So if I want to go over this one more time, maybe later, sometimes I do, and get some real fine shapes, I do that. As you can see, I blend somewhat, but I do pay attention to shape. Here in the back of the drapery, I did take some liberties to make this a little darker, and then I made this a little lighter in the front so I can really show dark to light very specifically. Again, so I'm looking at what's in front of me, but I'm making a lot of adjustments and exaggerations. You can see it ends up looking pretty realistic, but there's some fiction that I've added to this piece, which is pushing and pulling. So lightening up, darkening, things like that, where I can get a more dramatic effect. It seems detailed, but it's very loose. I mean, if I bring this close, you can see it's very loose brush stroke. And in some areas, I've just kind of left it, blended, especially in the back, just leaving some atmospheric feeling there so that, it's just not brought up everywhere. It makes it more interesting as you move through the canvas. Okay, well, that is all for this still life, and this is still life 1, and it's parts 1, 2, and 3. We're going to be working in a series next, and I hope you enjoyed. Again, let me know if you have any questions. You can ask them at the bottom of the YouTube, or of course in Canvas, where this video will also be posted. Have a lovely evening. This is the weekend here, so have a gorgeous rest of your weekend, and I will be back painting with you soon.